Welcome to beabossdad.com. My name is Joel, and this is where we help you win at business and win at life so you can scale your business without failing your family. At a recent Canva keynote, the CEO, I believe it was, came out and said something so profound and something that goes to the heart of a major pillar of what it takes to actually be a boss dad. And in this video, I'm going to give you the exact framework to reclaim something that you've lost, and in the process, reclaim your freedom. So at this keynote, the CEO came out and they said something. They went through kind of a history of different ages and eras that we've had throughout human history. We have the Stone Age, and we get up to more modern times in the past 125 years or so, and we get into the industrial age, and we get into, fast forward decades later, we get into when the computer was invented, and we get into the internet, right? And it wasn't that long ago in the scope of human history, actually only a blip, where we have smartphones. And so some of their focus, and I'm going to do a separate video on a marketing aspect of what they did, because it was an absolute masterclass, to be honest with you. But one of the things that they went through was this history. And so when you think about what are the things that have actually propelled humans forward, well, we think about the wheel, right? We think about roads and transportation and being able to take food from one location to another more efficiently. We look at the ways that we can expand outside of our local area and get into other cultures and other food, which I happen to be a fan of, and meet new people and get new perspectives. And all of these things are just absolutely amazing. We have the airplane, and that shortened the time that it takes to get to new locations. We have international communication, something that we absolutely take for granted in today's era. And then moving forward, once the internet was really popularized, we get into the age of the information era. And so it was mind-blowing, right? That we could actually put a search term in even before Google and get information out, and perhaps information that we didn't know. The past several decades through that have been this capturing of information and getting more knowledge and more understanding of how the world works and how we can apply that to our business and our family and our relationships and our own personal life. But the profound thing that was said, and this is such a great perspective, is that we have all the information now that we need in our pockets. I mean, this little thing captures and encapsulates all the different information around the world. We have more information today than we did at any other time in human history. You look back, and it was a point where we looked up encyclopedias, right? Dating myself a little bit there, but it's true. We yearned for information, and that information came from various sources. But we have all the information that we need in our pockets. We don't need more information. What we lack is the imagination to build the life that we truly want. And as a high-achieving father, as a boss dad, as I call it, which is balanced owner, strategic shepherd, a lot of times you know how to build a business, and that's the information piece. But there's a separate piece that's missing, that we can't seem to build a life where you're a present father and also a successful CEO or an entrepreneur or a solopreneur. And the reality is, it's not about more information, and it's not about more hustle. That is a misnomer. But there are three chains that are killing your imagination, and we'll get into that. But one of the things that I take my clients through is a concept called thought time. And thought time is not the amount of time you spend thinking, but what time are your thoughts? If you're constantly finding yourself thinking about the past, it is absolutely chaining your present, and it is limiting the future that you could become. In fact, your future then gets defined by your past. And so I spent a little bit of time in the coaching that I do just talking about what time are your thoughts. And if you can recognize that you're thinking about your past too much and not being able to be present today for your business, for your family, and certainly not having the time to think through what is next, what could be possible, then you are restricting the potential that you have as a human, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, and certainly as a father. We've talked in another video about this guilt sandwich, right? Of being home but not present, of being in a boardroom but knowing that you're missing out on your kid's soccer game. And that's a real thing. Guilt that comes to that dichotomy of identities is a real problem. You're there, but you're not there. You're present, but you're thinking about something else, and you're constantly feeling like you're disappointing someone. There was that time in my own life where our daughter, she was probably 6 or 7, and I came home through the door. It had been a long day, and she had a drawing that she wanted to show me. And Daddy, look at this. And oh, that's really nice, honey. And it caught me later. Like I realized later that evening that I don't even know what she showed me, because my thoughts were on something else that happened at a different time instead of being present in the moment. And I get that. You know, we've all been there, right? But even in that case, just being present and trying to find out what the next step is, it's not a lack of information. We have the information that we need. You can find with AI practically anything that you want and create new things, right? It's not more productivity hacks. It's not more business books. It's not more systems. And it's definitely not more hustle, because we're drowning in information. That's the reality of it. We have all of the knowledge of human history right here in our pockets. Information isn't the problem. And what they started with at this Canva keynote is a shift in perspective that I think, if you can embrace this shift, will really, really change, one, the culture of your home, but certainly the dynamics of who you are as a person, where your business goes to, and absolutely change the legacy through your family. What was said was this: we believe we're moving from the information era and into the imagination era. And if you think about that, we believe we're moving from the information era, outside of trying to gain more information, and into the era of capturing imagination. That was an absolute masterclass, by the way, from a marketing perspective. And you think back to like Disney, right? Imagining all of these things. And it was one of the things that catapulted Disney's success in videography and movies and film, was they captured imagination. Steve Jobs did the same thing when he was presenting the iPhone for the first time. And you know, the original iPhone didn't do a whole lot. It didn't have a whole lot of things that it did, but he captured the imagination of the world and posed the question, can this be done differently? Can we interact with information in a different way? And this was something that Canva got profoundly right, moving away from the information era and into the imagination era, where you are no longer bound by the information you can access, but only by the limits of your imagination. And that goes to a core problem, dear boss dad. The problem is a lack of imagination in our own lives, in our business, and with our family. A lot of times as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a high stakes CEO, C-suite executive, we go through this process, right? We imagine 10xing a business. We can see the revenue charts growing. We can build the funnels, but you've stopped letting yourself imagine a 10x life, because we get stuck in several silos. We've stopped imagining a life of harmony, a life where you are calm, present, you're a connected father, and also an elite, successful leader in your business. So here's the deal. You cannot build what you cannot imagine. You're living a life by default, going through the motions, not by design. Design, by definition, takes imagination in order to design something, in order to get from one place to another place. And it starts by breaking these 3 chains that are holding you captive. So why did we stop? You know, as a founder, as a creator, as an innovator, at one point in time, we had that imagination, and we had this vision for a business that we wanted to grow, to take us from the 9 to 5 into the, 9 to 12 as an entrepreneur. And we stopped innovating that vision. Maybe we still have it for our business, but we've stopped doing that in our personal lives. And one of the number one reasons why this stopped and held us back is what I call the provider pressure trap. You're caught in that trap. And this is that immense financial responsibility that you feel with your family, which forces you to say yes to every opportunity and every client and every fire that needs to be put out. You're successful earning an income, but you're trapped. So you take on that nightmare client that you then really, really regret. And you did. You say yes to the weekend project, even though you promised your wife you'd be present. You're grinding away at doing most of the things, but you're not getting ahead in the ways that matter. And when you're in that constant low grade fight or flight survival and provision mode, imagination takes a back burner because you have to do all the things and you have to say yes to all the things. And it feels like a luxury that you can't afford because it's not billable. And so it's one of the first things to go is imagination and it's vision. And it's just allowing yourself to take a step back, take a bird's eye view, if you will, and imagine a different way. Every segment of human progress comes back down to someone said, I think this can be done differently. And they envisioned that and they designed it and they tried it and they probably and most likely failed, but then they learned a new way to not do it, right? And they learned how to improve on that and how to make that work. So that's the number one thing. It's just this provider pressure trap of having to say yes to all the things, but not saying yes to the most important things. And I get it. I get that pressure. I've lived that life. I understand. It's a real thing. And so I'm not demeaning that. It's a real thing, but it's also a real problem because if you cannot imagine something else for your future, that's where a lack of hope comes in. And a lack of hope trying to do anything in your business, in your family, in your personal life is where dreams go to die. And so that's the first thing. The second, we talked about it in the beginning, is this thought time. And you're chained to the past of prior experiences. You're constantly replaying this old soundtrack in your head. And so let this just be a little reminder to you to ask yourself, what time are my thoughts? Go through it, kind of audit your day yesterday, audit your day today, and just ask yourself, what did I spend my time thinking about? Was it failures of the past? Okay, failures are there to help us learn and grow and to find a new way to do things. But if we're constantly focused on the failure, we neglect our ability to dream about to imagine a different potential, a different outcome, a different way of doing it, and certainly a different way of success. In that soundtrack of our past, it sounds like success requires this kind of sacrifice, is what we tell ourselves. My dad worked 80 hours a week, so I have to. If you want to get it done right, you got to do it yourself. We've all probably said that. I'm just not a patient person. I am a hard-charging CEO. That's who I am. You have to hustle and grind to be successful. And so in the coaching that I do, that's why it's one of the first things that I address is the mindset of what time are you spending thinking about all of the things? Are you living in the past? Are you replaying all these old tapes, all these old soundtracks, or are you living in a future creatively looking forward to what it is that you're trying to achieve? You can't imagine a new future if you're chained to the soundtrack of your past. You're letting your past define your present. And as I've said before, that restricts the future potential of anything that you are trying to do. So that is a cycle that has to be broken. And then the third thing is this lie about information. You're chained by the information lie, and that is the addiction to information. You think if you just find one more hack, if there's one more system, one more app, then you'll be able to fix this problem. Then you'll have this work-life balance concept that I actually think is a little bit of a misnomer. It's actually a lot of a misnomer. But you're optimizing a broken model. And so the model has to change. You're not solving the problem. You're just getting more efficient at being trapped. You're polishing the bars of your own prison. And that is a place that you will get nowhere fast. Information tells you what is. Imagination tells you what could be. And there is a time and a place to find more information, to get more knowledge, to get more experience, to be mentored, to be coached, all of those things. But in most cases, it's not about more information. Information is how you're surviving. Imagination is how you're going to thrive. So what does it take to make that transition from more information, more hustle, more grind, to more imagination? And this is a key principle that you have to get. In order to imagine something different, you have to be vulnerable enough to tell yourself that what you're doing might not be the most efficient way to do it, that there could be a different way that actually produces better results. You have to have that vulnerability of admitting that the way that you're living or the way that you're doing isn't working. And so having that hero mentality and grinding it out is actually failing your family, it's failing yourself, and it's failing your business. So thing number one, you have to have the vulnerability to admit that something could be different and in fact could be better. And then number two, it takes curiosity. And I really believe that those two things are actually what makes the difference between living in a past state or being stuck in your present and actually moving the entire experience of being a human, of owning a business, of being a dad, being a leader, being a spouse. It makes the difference of making progress. Vulnerability has to be number one, and curiosity joined inside of that is the difference. And so being curious enough to ask, what if there is a better way? What if just being guilty about not being present at the soccer game or missing the boardroom meeting, what if being guilty about that isn't a requirement for success? What if I could actually build a life of harmony? And that's the starting point. Go back to all of the inventions that were done through the years, and you'll find a vulnerability and you'll find a curiosity. And when those two things meet, then you have a period of time where imagination happens, design happens, and actual progress is made. One of the things I talk about with my coaching clients is the principle that clarity is the starting point for control. And whether that's understanding where you are, and maybe it is going back into your past and getting healing for a past trauma, that's totally fine. But clarity is the starting point for control. You can't get control until you get clear. So let's get clear. Let's actually take the step of being vulnerable enough to ask the question and being curious enough to find an answer. So how do we do this? How do we go from reactor to imaginer? How do we become a conductor of our life instead of just a musician getting pulled around by the score? We use a process that I call the inventor's loop. It's the same process that built the wheel. It's the same process that built the computer and the smartphone that you're probably holding in your pocket. And this is the core of the B.O.S.S Dad framework. Again, B.O.S.S Dad is balanced owner, strategic shepherd. The process is how you become a balanced leader and a strategic shepherd of your own life and in your family. So first we imagine, but we can't just daydream. It helps to have a framework around this. And so taking a minute to just dream a little bit. Maybe you go for a hike and at the top of the mountain, you take a moment and pause. Maybe it's at the end of a long week. Take a moment and pause and think about all the key areas of life, which is fitness, finance, family, field, your career, faith, friends, and fun. And right now, that guilt sandwich that we talked about means that these 7 key areas of life, they're out of balance. Your career might be a 9 out of 10. You're an entrepreneur, you're a C-suite executive, you're a business owner with 20 employees. And you look at that and you're like, wow, I'm hitting it on almost all fronts. But your family's at a 4 or a 3 or a 2. Your finances might be at an 8, but your health is suffering because of where you are. And a business is only as healthy as its leader, but you're leading a life from an imbalance, both of your time thoughts and of your actions. So one of the things I like to do in my coaching program is to write down these dream statements. We take the 7 key areas of life and we break that down, and we take a minute to just write down and imagine what it could be like if those frustrating parts of that area of your life were taken care of. And imagine what it could be like if your future home was on the beach, which I would love to have, right? What would it be like if you have a connection in your family that's not there? What would it be like to wake up with energy and to actually have a good and restful full night's sleep? So we take a minute to just imagine that. And I actually have my coaching clients write that down. There's 7 different pieces of paper, PDFs, and they create a dream statement. Because when you give your brain something to target, our brain is an amazing answer-seeking device, if you will. Better questions equal better answers. Allowing yourself to dream gives your brain that target of what it is you're striving for, what it is that makes the hustle and the grind all worth it, because you are moving in a direction of a life, of a business, of a family, and of yourself that is different from where you are. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. If your fitness is suffering, if your health is suffering, you're probably telling yourself, I'm exhausted. I live on caffeine. I'm snapping at my kids constantly because I'm at my limit. Imagining could be, I wake up before my family, clear-headed. I have the physical energy to wrestle with my kids on the floor after a full day's work. Maybe your family is an area that's suffering and you're telling yourself, I'm distracted at dinner. My wife is frustrated. I feel disconnected and she feels alone. Imagining a different outcome could be, I'm home for dinner every night, or at least most nights, and my phone is in my drawer. I'm fully present. My wife and I have a weekly non-negotiable date night. We are a team, a congruent team that comes together for the benefit of our family. Maybe in your business, you're telling yourself the business is successful, but it's a prison. I'm trapped. It depends 100% on me. I am the bottleneck. Imagining a different future could be, my business is an asset that serves my life. It runs on systems, not me. Systems create freedom. It provides the fuel for my family's dreams and future. The chained part of fun, you're probably asking yourself, what is fun? I don't even know what that word means. I haven't had fun. I haven't had a day off in longer than I can remember. And that's no way to live. We are designed for connection. We're designed for experiences. And if you're asking yourself, when was the last time you had a little bit of fun? That's a problem. Imagining a difference could be, fun is scheduled. We have a family bucket list. We take that vacation. We have hobbies outside of work where we can spend time actually being connected that's not connected to the business. It's not connected to a failure of the past. It's not connected to all of those things we've talked about that are actually chaining your present and restricting your future. And this is the first step. You're creating your future on paper. You're giving your brain a new target. You're writing a new soundtrack. So we have that 30,000-foot view at this point. You've written your dream statements in all the 7 key areas of life, but what does it take to actually make it real, to actually design that future? And so once you have a target, you can then reverse engineer into a tangible daily reality. You can actually think through, what does my perfect day look like? I have a framework in my coaching of just designing your perfect day and going from all of the stress of the bad day and walking into what does a perfect day look like? Now, look, I'm a business owner. I understand there are not a lot of perfect days. As an entrepreneur, as somebody that's trying to do something different and create something that consumers will want to buy, I get it. Like, it's not easy, but you have to take the time to set a new target. You have to take the time to write a new soundtrack and ask yourself, what would a truly successful day look and feel like? What does it mean? What time do you wake up? What's the first thing that you do? How do you feel? You're not rushed. You're not stressed. You're not anxious. What if you felt calm and present and strong? And when you do work, is it a blocked, protected time of deep work, or is it a distracted mess of all the different fires that are coming at you? None of that is productive. But now let's take a look and zoom in on the most critical 5 minutes of your day. It's not the boardroom meeting that you had, and it may not even be the fire that you had to put out. The one moment that defines whether you lose or whether you win at home comes down to the most important 5 minutes of your day. And it's the transition that you take from work to home. You can't go from hard charging CEO to patient present dad in 5 minutes. You're bringing all that stress and all that CEO energy right through the front door. And who gets it? Who gets that? Who gets pushed by that energy? It's your wife and it's your kids. And they feel alone, they feel unseen, and they don't feel connected to you as a father. You need a process and you need a design. And I will do a future video on this transition, the CEO to dad transition, what I like to call a firewall of the process that it takes to go from when you leave work and the time it takes to get home, or the time that it takes to walk out of your home office, and an actual framework around changing that transition to be, instead of one of reaction where you walk through the door and a kid has spilled milk all over the floor and you're walking into this chaos, to bring your calm and your presence into your home because you have decided your identity before you walk through the door. You've done your brain dump of all the things that are going through your head of what has to happen tomorrow at work. You've changed your physiology and you've changed your mindset. And so you walk through the door, as you walk through that threshold, it's a different identity. And you actually take your kids who are in perhaps this chaos moment, and maybe your wife that has had a rough day, and you bring them into your calm instead of adding to the chaos. So once you've gone through those 3 steps, you have actually designed a system for presence. You've designed a ritual for being that loving, present father that also was a hard-charging CEO and an entrepreneur with 5 billion different ideas that you're trying to implement. You've made that transition. You've designed a system for presence. But this is the most important part, and that is action. It takes vulnerability and it takes curiosity, but now it's time to take action. And this is the inventor's loop. As an entrepreneur, I'm sure you can relate to that. This is where most entrepreneurs actually fail in their personal lives. Imagination without action is just hallucination. Let me repeat that. Imagination without action is nothing more than hallucination. We dream about it, but we don't design. We design, but we don't do. And this is what all the historical figures of the inventors throughout the history of mankind, this is what they did differently. That person who imagined the wheel didn't just think about it and it appeared. They imagined it, they designed it, probably a prototype, and it probably was awful. It was probably lumpy and terrible, but they acted and they built it, and it broke. And then they reviewed why it broke, and they imagined a better version. And now we have the wheel, and we take it for granted, but it is one of the things that gets us from point A to point B efficiently and in a timely manner. Why aren't we applying that same exact process that built your business as an entrepreneur to building your life? So your action for today isn't to change your whole life. That's unreasonable, and that's super high expectations. That's just overwhelming. And that's also why you quit. Your action is just to do one thing. That's it. Just one. One thing from the perfect day that you imagined, and do it tomorrow. Maybe it's that 5-minute transition ritual when you get out of your car and step through the threshold of your home. Maybe it's just a simple habit of putting your phone in the drawer. Maybe it's waking up 15 minutes earlier to journal. Take one action, just one. You have to stop letting your past chain your present. Stop repeating that soundtrack that it can't be done. It can be done. You just have to have the courage to imagine it and the discipline to design it and do it. So I've spent most of this video talking about some of those frameworks and the imagination and the systems, but I want to land on this. What's the point? What is this? Why does this actually matter? Why go through all the work of changing what's not working right now? It matters because of a number that I share with all of my clients. It's a number that changed the perspective for me, and that number is 940. 940. That's roughly how many Saturdays you have between the birth of your child and their 18th birthday. 940, that's it. That's your inventory that you have to work with. How many have already been used? How many have you already lost to quote unquote urgent work that actually wasn't that important? How many have you lost to just the time of guilt, of being physically there, but mentally 1,000 miles away? How many have you lost to a lack of imagination? This isn't about creating guilt. It's about creating urgency. And that's what this 940 number really speaks to. Your business can last for decades. In fact, it might even go on without you. Your child's childhood is a fleeting moment. 940, my friends. And because that inventory is finite, time, our most valuable asset, is something that we cannot constrain. Along those lines, we have to stop telling our kids in our words and our actions that it can't be done. We have to stop modeling a life of stress and distraction as the price of success. It's not, because your kids are watching and they're learning, regardless of how you are doing it. You are the chief culture officer of your home. You have a culture in your company, whether you designed it or not. I hope you have, but whether you designed it or not, you have a culture in your company. The same is true for your family. Right now, is it a culture of calm and connection, or is it one of chaos and distraction? You're the strategic shepherd. A shepherd leads, a shepherd is intentional, and a shepherd protects. The systems that we design, the CEO to dad ritual, that firewall, weekly family syncs with your spouse, these aren't corporate formalities. These are the rituals that intentionally build the culture that your family deserves. Your kids won't remember your revenue charts. They will remember your presence. They will remember your time. And the ultimate measure of your success as a boss dad, the ultimate ROI on your entire life, will be the answer that your child gives when years from now someone asks them, "What was your dad like?" Is their answer going to be, "Well, he was a great guy. He provided for us. We always had food," which is fantastic, by the way, but he was always working and he was always stressed. He was always on his phone. I guess I didn't really know him. Is that going to be the answer? Or will they say he was there? He was my biggest fan. He was present. He built an amazing business, but never at our sacrifice. He was happy. He was home. He showed me how to design a life. He inspired my imagination. He cultivated a thought process, and he showed me what a boss dad really looks like. That's the legacy question that you have to imagine. That's the legacy that we have this incredible opportunity to build. Canva got it right. We are in the imagination era. Stop optimizing the prison of information. Start imagining the life of freedom, and then take action. So tonight, take 15 minutes. You can afford 15 minutes. Put your phone in another room and have the courage to imagine, have the courage to dream about a different possibility than your present, and definitely a difference in the thought process of your path. And then pick one thing, just one small action that you will take tomorrow to start your own inventor's loop. That's it, just start. And if you're done guessing, if you're tired of that constant guilt sandwich, that provider pressure trap, not having the firewall, and you want an actual operating system to become that boss dad, then I invite you to join the 5-day Boss Dad Challenge, where we take an hour for 5 days, an hour out of the day for 5 days, and we just focused on each of the core principles, being a balanced owner and a strategic shepherd. We install the systems, we do the work, we get you your family back and your freedom. The link is in the description. I hope you'll join me. Your family is worth it. Your business is worth it. And you, my friends, are worth it. So stop reacting. Start imagining. Let's get started. That, my friends, is the Boss Dad approach to going from the information era into the imagination era. Win at business, win at life, be a boss dad.